Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to be able to start perfectly on time. Thank you, everyone, for being so much on schedule. So I think we are ready to start like our last roundtable for this seminar, Saving Our Oceans, the Case for MSP. It's the last, but definitely not the least. We're going to be addressing a very crucial issue on the implementation of MSP at a regional scale. So we just mentioned what happened with the communities, the community engagement at a local scale. And now we're going to see from a different perspective, a bigger picture. And actually, I'm exceedingly happy that we are going to have as a moderator, Ms. Sheila Hemmans, who is the Executive Director of the European Marine Board. And for those who are not familiar to it, the European Marine Board is the leading European marine science policy think tank. So let me introduce you briefly. So Ms. Sheila Hemmans is also professor in ecosystem modeling at the Scottish Association for Marine Science and the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. She has 30 years of experience in research on the environmental impacts of ecosystem change and has published over 90 peer-reviewed publications. Sheila is also co-chair of the ECOS steering group and on the external advisory board for various projects, including Eurofleets Plus and the EU Blue Cloud. She's finally also the editor of EMV policy documents. So for all these reasons, I think we are very lucky to have you today as the moderator of this session. And with no further blah, blah, the floor is yours, Sheila. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valerie. So it's a real pleasure for me to be moderating this session. We will have two speakers, as we did in the previous session, and two respondents. So I'm not going to go into any detail for these. I think the speakers actually have a much better idea of this topic. So I will just introduce them briefly, as we did in the previous sessions. Our first speaker is Marianne Perron Diozi. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Marianne. I'm really bad at different pronunciations. So Marianne is a research fellow at the Institute for Strategic Research at the Military School, IRSEM. And she's also affiliated with the French Institute for International and Strategic Relations. She was the strategic advisor for the EU maritime project Crimario between 2015 and 2019, and is now doing the same for the project Crimario 2 from 2020 onwards. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Marianne to start your talk, and yeah, you've got 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for your kind introduction, and thank you for MIMA, the EU delegation and the French Embassy in Malaysia, for inviting me. I'm very glad and very honored to be there and to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you and to take part to the discussion. So I'm going to share, I'm going to share my screen now. I don't know if you are showing the, okay. Just, yes, I'm just clicking on my PowerPoint. Do you see my screen, Sheila?
You do not see your screen, no. You have to share the screen, right? And pick the right screen if you have more than one.
Okay, so I'm not, so sorry for that.
Getting into your 10 minutes.
Oh my God, yes, I'm losing my time. Sheila, do you see my screen now? I'm clicking on
you
it.
have not shared your screen.
What is that?
Okay. I don't know if Cheryl or anyone from the technical staff could give us a hand with this.
Sorry, Valerie, I don't have the copy of Marianne's PPT, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm really sorry for that. Sheila, do you think you can share it for me? I do not understand what's happening. To be frank,
Sheila, maybe we could move on to the next presentation and then go back to Marianne once we have her backup presentation, so then we don't lose time and everyone is more relaxed.
Yeah, I can share the screen for her, and then she can just go next slide. If you give me a moment to do the same thing. Now I've really done something to my screen here. So do you guys see my screen?
We do.
Okay, now then we're halfway there. And now let's see. Okay, now you should see the slides.
I'm so sorry for that. Thank you for your help, Sheila. What a
No
pity.
problem.
Okay, so I've been told to speak about the relation between maritime security and blue economy, and to introduce the EU PRIMA-EU project, which is dedicated to maritime capacity building and is proposing to cooperation in the region, the platform of exchange, PRIMA-EU and IORIS, the Indo-Pacific Regional Information Sharing System. And I will go back on detail more on this subject. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, you are going to help me, Sheila. I would like just to give briefly some element of context and to mention the African Integrated Maritime Strategy that was published in 2015, which emphasized the importance of maritime resources, including fisheries, but also sea-related economic activities. And of course, insisting on the value of the maritime domain, and of course, the need to better protect the maritime domain against a lot of criminal activities. Of course, piracy, as you may know, but many other forms of trafficking. And this strategy was really important to underline the importance of the African maritime domain, not only because the activity or port of fishing, but also the need to secure the maritime route, sea lane of communication. And in parallel to this African strategy, African countries put gradually in place a system based on the code of conduct of Yaoundé and Djibouti, which become really pillars for the development of regional cooperation, not only in the Western Indian Ocean, but also in the Gulf of Guinea. And in 2018, Kenya hosted an international conference on the blue economy. This conference was supported by Japan, Canada, and EU, and really put an accent between the blue economy and maritime security, and was totally in line with other major events. No need to say the Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement, and the first United Nations Ocean Conference. And EU was invited to this international conference and asked PRIMA-EU to organize a side event. And the topic that was chosen was especially in relation between maritime security and the blue economy, which was clearly in line with the objective of the project PRIMA-EU and its action in favor on the enhancements of maritime domain awareness. And for that, PRIMA-EU invited different speakers from different backgrounds, a representative of the EU NAFA Atalanta project, speakers from Seychelles, from Cameroon, a company dedicated to maritime situational awareness, and a representative of the EU sistership project of PRIMA-EU called GOGIN, which is developed in the Gulf of Guinea. And all pointed out the link between maritime security and the blue economy, and the fact that without a sufficient degree of security, ocean resources cannot be developed. Could I have next slide, Sheila, please? And you can see, yes, some of the major outcome from this conference, this side events, with element emphasizing the discussion on sustainability and the fact that environmental protection requires law enforcement capacity, specific security tools, fishery regulation that need to be enforced, and environmental crime stopped with appropriate means. And it was clear for all of the attendants that the two agenda, maritime security and blue economy, was interdependent to a very
5 minutes, Marianne.
degree. Okay. Could I have next slide, please, Sheila? And now we are turning maybe and going more broadly in the Primario project, which is dedicated to the Indo-Pacific and which is clearly in line with the EU Indo-Pacific strategy. Next slide, please. Which want to, of course, going beyond the security of the maritime supply route and to go into deeper with the security regional consideration of the whole and very vast area, which is in itself quite a big challenge. Next slide, please. And of course, in this Indo-Pacific strategic landscape, there is quite an accent regarding non-traditional security threat and the need for the littoral state to protect the maritime domain environment against criminal activities, the development of blue crime, and to raise the importance of the blue economy. And of course, there is a concern regarding the weak law enforcement forces and a perception of a global weak maritime domain awareness. And it seems that EU is taking into account this littoral state concern and included the EU Primario capacity building activities in the scope of the EU strategy. Next slide, please. As you can see on the slide, so the EU wanted really to promote, to implement a specific program dealing with regional maritime security, a capacity building program, and decided to extend the scope of Primario to South Asia, Southeast Asia, and in a more, I will say, further perspective, to the South China Sea. And the importance of the approach of EU, is underlined by the ambition of EU to put a specific accent on regional cooperation and to develop synergy with like-minded partners. Next slide, please, Sheila. And of course, the EU ambition is to help to build maritime capacity and to notably to encourage a consolidation of information sharing mechanism, that is to say, to offer the use of its platform of exchange of information called IORIS, and to develop synergy with the other similar mechanism in the region, that is to say, all of the fusion center encompassed in the Indo-Pacific area. Next slide, please. And so the objective of the Primario 2 project, which has been developed at 6/20/20, is really to take part and to help the region to enhance maritime security and to put a specific accent on information sharing, information exchange, but also to try to promote regional cooperation by developing some capacity for law enforcement body and maritime agency in the whole region. Next slide, Sheila, please. And so you can see briefly on the screen the IORIS functionality and what is the aim of this platform of exchange, which is based on the concept of connectivity, which is really important and is a key word for the region. It is a very vast area, so maritime connectivity is very important. And this concept is at the core of the EU approach and the EU strategy for cooperation in the whole region. The next slide, and maybe would be the last, Sheila. Yes, and so by developing this info sharing platform and this concept, of course, EU wanted to stress on the I would say the regional approach, want to increase MDF for the whole region for the benefit of like-minded partner, and of course wanted to help and I will say enhance the capability of Coast Guard, law enforcement, maritime agency of the whole regions. And if I had to conclude, because I think I'm running out of my time, to really, I will say, give a concrete illustration to the theme of cooperation, and to, I will say, develop a collaborative approach with a lot of partners in the region without duplicating any other approach initiative, but to try to find synergy and complementarity with many other maritime projects developed in the region. And I will end my presentation, and sorry for the problem with sharing my screen.
It's no problem. I think we have time. So if you wanted to add a few more words, I think that should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, and so what I wanted to point out is this cross-regional cooperation, which is at the core of the project Crimario, having in mind that it is really a challenge for EU to extend its scope and to propose its cooperation to this very vast Indo-Pacific area, but taking into account that there are already specific mechanisms that are existing and a very active and effective maritime security architecture. And I have in mind not only the fusion centers that are developing in the region, the Changi Fusion Center in Singapore, the fusion center implemented by India, the Indian Ocean Region Fusion Center, but also the fusion center elaborated in Madagascar, with the aim of helping to plug this system all together and to extend the maritime, I will say, picture along all of the, I will say, the maritime basin of the Indo-Pacific, that is to say, trying to link or helping to link the Indian Ocean part, the Pacific part, not to forget this specific corridor and very strategic important corridor that could represent the South China Sea, and not to forget the extension, which is very often overlooked, the extension of the Indo-Pacific, which is the South Pacific country, having in mind that a fusion center has been recently established in the Vanuatu. So you can see on this slide all of the cooperation and the partnerships that are already engaged through this project Crimario by EU with a lot of partners in Africa, in Southeast Asia and South Asia, and the will in a longer perspective to be able to extend this maritime connectivity through the proposal of the capacity building project Crimario till the South Pacific Island. And this will be my conclusion, Sheila, and I warmly thank you for your passion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so now our next speaker, let me just get you guys back on the main screen here so I can actually look at you. Our next speaker is going to be Ole, and I need to get your name right as well, Vestergaard. I think, I'm sure I'm not doing it justice, but there you go. He is a program officer at the Marine, Coastal and Freshwater Ecosystems branch of the Environmental Policy Implementation at UNEP, at UN Environment, based in Nairobi in Kenya, and lucky you. He has been involved in the development and implementation of the UN Environment Initiatives on Marine and Coastal Ecosystem-Based Management and Adaptation, and looked at tools and technical guidelines, training, demonstration, and policy advice. So your 10 minutes will start, I think now. I think what we're seeing is actually not the, we're seeing the speaker notes. So you might want to go up to display settings and change your, the top of the screen. If you go up, or maybe that, Yeah, if you click on display settings, right at the top of the screen. You see right at the top of the screen, it says display settings, just above your mouse, from what I can see.
I don't see it here. Sorry for that.
It's okay.
Because I have it here for.
I think it's showing on the wrong screen right now for you.
Yeah. So
you want to go up to the top of the screen where it says display settings, very top of.
Ole, do you want me to share the screen for you?
Yeah, you can do that too.
Yeah, I'll do it for you.
Thank you for that. Right, while it's coming online, I'll just start my presentation. So Ole Vestergaard, Marine Program, leading our sustainable economy work. Indeed, using tools like marine spatial planning at our national and regional work with regional seas and so forth. So I listened with great interest to the previous panel as well. It's clear that MSP is an important tool for blue economy, and yet perhaps there's some challenges in how you apply this tool. And the key point is, how do you actually bring in the blue economy policy agenda into practice using MSP? So we have prepared, we are in the process of preparing a tool, a framework that can help countries make the blue economy planning and implementation operational, including using tools like marine spatial planning. Next slide, please. So we have developed what we call a transition framework to blue economy that really makes the transition to blue economy practical and achievable. Next slide, please. In our view, and aligned with many policy objectives, including the Green Deal, European Green Deal, and other, the regional sea state direction, at the heart of the blue economy is 100% well-managed and healthy ocean. And top priority is to enable and protect less tangible blue assets like sustainable lifestyles and livelihoods, sound food systems, natural infrastructure as basis for a nature-based solution approach, thriving marine life, climate mitigation adaptation, including blue carbon, and within that also ensuring responsible sectors, ocean sectors, tourism, sustainable fisheries, and renewable energy. Next, please. The key outcomes, as we see for blue economy, is increasing revenue, enabling sustainable growth in the maritime economy through enhanced services provided by a healthy environment, strengthen livelihoods and food security, ensure fair and equitable access to ocean wealth, and contribution to climate change mitigation. Yeah, fine, next slide, please. The challenge in all countries is how do you actually organize that transition and identify the key steps? What does the vision look like? Balancing social, economic, and environmental objectives. What are the key challenges that are faced across sectors? Why, who need to be engaged? What are the key issues that should be addressed, and how do you organize that transition? So basically, our framework really takes a deeper dive into organizing what the blue economy actually can look like before jumping into a detailed zoning and planning process. Next slide, please. And to capture what we regard core elements of a blue economy, we have defined 5 core elements that we can see should be in a sustainable economy. 5 elements of core principles. It should protect, restore, and regenerate healthy ecosystems. It should deliver equitable and inclusive processes and outcomes. It should enable climate stability, resilience. And the blue economy should deliver sustainable consumption and production, and ideally apply and facilitate circular economy approaches. Next, please. So you can actually look at those 5 core elements and break down and identify a whole range of benefits from a blue economy that carry these elements, from increased extent of effectively managed MPAs, restoration of ecosystems, increase representation of women, youth, and marginalized groups in the blue economy. Blue economy activities, infrastructure, communities that aim for carbon neutrality, for instance. Regulatory and financial incentive for sustainable practices in extraction and production, and greater consumer awareness and sustainable choices. I will not go into the detail. I will share this presentation, and the key point is there are many objectives across different and outcome that benefits that can be linked together in a joined up blue economy framework. Next, please. To give an example, ecosystem-based carbon sequestration called blue forest or blue carbon, healthy mangroves can absorb carbon and derive many co-benefits in addition to carbon sequestration. It can protect from erosion, it can protect from storm surge and flooding and water filtration and so forth. So blue forest was one example that you show how different policy areas contribute to a sustainable blue economy. Next, please. The key challenge for all is then how do we make that practical and achievable? So we have developed a decision support tool that can help a policy coherence design process. It contains a practical and practical approach for governments to operational blue economy. It assists identifying pathways to a blue economy. It provides a rapid readiness assessment approach for initial screening of blue economy, and it guides the development of an effective enabling environment, including sound science, governance, and financing. Next, please. It aims to support countries as important clients, but of course with all the relevant stakeholders, communities, industry, and investors. And it is really aiming to complement and contribute to existing processes within a country. Everything that is happening within sectors, in MSP, economic planning, in social planning are there at the table. This framework will add to that and help bring some of those together. Next, please. And just, I will go to the framework right now, but just to emphasize that the challenge there is to make things practical, achievable, and customized to a country's setting, which is differing from country to country. And also just to remind us, there is no universal definition of a blue economy, and it means different things to different countries. Next slide, please. So here in a nutshell, the framework breaking down this process in 3 main steps. It brings together an understanding of the existing system and develop a good understanding of system links, both the policy areas, economic links, and social aspirations across policy areas. The centerpiece of the framework is in the middle part, strategic policy development. It helps define a blue economy vision, building on those 5 elements I mentioned. And it connects that to an integrated policy framework and through a policy coherence analysis. And the key outcome of that phase is what we could call a blue economy blueprint or action plan or maritime strategy and so forth. And I think in this context of Malaysia, working to a blueprint of a blue economy, this is a very helpful exercise. And then with that blueprint, you move into the 3rd element we call delivering change. And I will get back to that in a second. That's where you have the MSP element. Next slide, please. And again, I will zoom through it quite quickly, but essentially it's about connecting different policy areas and sector strategies and understanding the existing policy landscape and institutional landscape, setting economic, social, environmental baselines. For instance, do public expenditure review, do an assessment of cumulative impacts on the environment, understanding the stakeholder and their needs, and it develops that dynamic map of system links. Next, please. This good understanding is really the foundation to set up a strong and practical blue economy vision, for which you can identify cross-sector and sector policy objectives, and you can set targets and indicators, and that feeds into a blueprint for a blue economy, and that is really the centerpiece of the framework. And next slide, please. Based on that, then you move into your integrated marine management. Could be coastal management, MSP. You build the relevant capacities, you collect knowledge and innovation, and you put in place a strong monitoring elevation framework. And this is exactly where we think that some of the discussion we just had earlier this afternoon about how do you get the stakeholders in here, how do you really deal with the potentially conflicting areas of interest across policy areas into your policy, into your MSP process. Otherwise, the MSP process, if they're not dealing with some of these core fundamental questions, the MSP will inherently also carry some of those conflicting and unresolved issues. Next slide, please. Through the process, there are a number of enabling actions that can be supporting the process. And again, that captures the discussion about stakeholder engagement, when and how, and in a nutshell, where do we put a leadership into a process that can really drive the transition to sustainable, inclusive, and resilient blue economy. And the leadership is not only government, certainly they are the main driver, but that means recruit the stakeholders, the industry interests, the local communities, and so forth. So we have some guidance on how you do that and how the stakeholders come in and what roles they are. Other enabling actions are the financing piece. How do you develop blended finance, public and private finance for blue economy, and how do you put in place a blue public finance framework? A coalition for change, all those interest groups and various important opinions and views can jointly drive that transition. So there's a way to make a coalition for that. And then lastly, but not least, the use of sound science and really enabling a good governance can be woven through the process. Next slide, please. This is just to remind us that there are so many partners in the blue economy transition. So just to remind us that is a really inclusive approach. And lastly, next slide, to remind us that this ambition of transitioning to a sustainable blue economy really about creating synergies and connectivity across partners and policy areas and interests. And the blue economy recognizes the society's dependence on ecosystem health and the complex interaction between different economic and social activities and the ocean. And I thank you. And at the end, last slide, I have some contacts and some information resources. So thanks for that, and I'm standing ready for engaging in further discussion.
Thank you very much, Ole. Okay, so for those of you online, please remember that you can ask questions in the Q&A for the two speakers that we've had so far. But before we get to the questions and answers, we're going to now go to some verbal statements, and we have two speakers who are going to give us statements. The first one is Professor Dr. Noranaya Haye Mokatar. Sorry, Professor, if I get your name wrong. She has served for 6 years as the Director and the Undersecretary at the National Geographic Directorate of the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation for Malaysia. And she is a professor that was appointed at the Malaysian as the Malaysian representative in the Coral Triangle Initiative, Coral Reefs, Fisheries and Food Security. She leads the task force for coastal management and was appointed as the head of the UMT Special Interest Group on Special Interest Group Cluster on Ocean Science and Sustainable Environment. And she spearheads the social innovation for quality education and transforming institutions by collaborating with industries, uplifting organizations and coastal communities, livelihoods in line with the SDGs through translational research, such as the One Hope program. So Professor Mokatar, your 5 minutes start now.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Good afternoon. Bonjour to everyone, distinguished guests, panel members, as well as organizers from EU Commission, as well as the Embassy of France and MIMA, of course. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this. And thank you for the kind introduction just now. Doesn't do justice for a short 5 minutes. I'm not going to have any slides as reminded by the Secretariat. Just to reiterate, I really appreciate the previous speakers for their sharing. And to reiterate in terms of the IOC UNESCO perspective, the MSP, Marine Spatial Planning, is actually a public process of analyzing and allocating the spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas to achieve ecological, economic, as well as social objectives that have been specified through a political process. So let me remind again, it is a guide as a step-by-step approach launched in 2009. And I thank Ole for proceeding to my talk on the transition framework, the effort by the UNEP, and as well as those speakers earlier with regards to the recognition that MSP is a tool towards blue economy in planning the blue economy. So it has become an internationally recognized standard, the MSP, that contributes to harmonizing the conceptual approach. With this MSP, it needs establishing of the authority through the mandate, be it global, regional, as well as the national, which is at the federal, as well as at the local level. So it has the planning and implementation, as well as monitoring and evaluation. So that process with the understanding and communicating this MSP is very crucial. So in 2019, MSP Global Initiative has been developed through UNESCO, IOC UNESCO, about the guideline, the international guidelines. So this is actually benefiting the effort as a decade of with the aspiration to save our ocean by 2030. So it is in line with the ocean decade of science, for the future we want. So it should be effectively implemented, science-based, ecosystem-based, but nonetheless, it contributes to the sketching of vision and the role of the MSP as a tool to implement the targets by 2030. But of course, we have the SDGs. Under this aspect, for the sustainable development, conservation of the ocean, we dedicate the SDG 14, life below water. In that respect, IOC has also engaged with other bodies, organ of the UN, which is Man and Biosphere Program in IOC UNESCO, the World Heritage Marine Program, so that we have the demonstration of the MSP tools in the marine conservation plans eventually. So in that context, we can interpret in a way that, because as the topic is for blue economy, and then Ole has really emphasized on the terminology and the framework, I believe the process that brings together multiple users of this ocean, which is include the economic sectors of, as we mentioned earlier in this by the speakers previously this morning, earlier, and also yesterday. It includes energy, the industry, the marine sector, the stakeholders, government, the NGOs, the communities, as well as we are looking at the conservation as well as recreation, so that we have informed decision and coordinated decisions for the use of marine resources. So with the rapid development around coastal and marine areas, which is I really applaud the European framework in terms of putting the coastal spatial information. When we talk about the users, the beneficiaries are the coastal communities, but we have the ocean sector, which is so vast. So we need to have this marine area planning, development, and sustainability of the oceans. So with the spatial information, talk about time and space and area, and integration of marine spatial information will actually improve the planning, better contribution to economy. We try to avoid conflicts of views, the environment and social cooperation within the organization. So be it at a maritime state or regional member states of maritime nations or the global, we talk about how to facilitate this cooperation within organization through this discourse that we have. And congratulations for having this forum, which lead to our better planning as far as we think that from France and Malaysia bilateral context of cooperation. But for the governance, for each nation, they have individual difficulties, especially on technical and governance issues, structural and communication, capacity development, and as well as policy integration for legal as well as monitoring frameworks. But before we do that, I think the first part that has been announced by the director of the Economic Planning Unit Malaysia, that we have launched this blueprint for blue economy. So the next steps will be continuous engagement to address the issues, as we have examples of MSP has been implemented, yeah, in Sabah through the Coral Triangle Initiative. We have to Mustafa Park, and we have the Sampurna. We have done very beautifully done by together with WWF and the state agencies and the communities. We also have heard about the case study of marine spatial planning in Terengganu, of which is actually an extension of the program that we have, the carrying capacity studies for the islands of Terengganu. But there are other gaps and issues, perhaps in terms of access to the network and data.
Can you wrap up, please?
Okay, access to the data, access to data and information that I think we need to work on this capability of GIS knowledge and technologies, and how we deal with that. And in Malaysia, we have the geospatial data infrastructure at the center, as well as other bodies where it's actually data repository for SDGs. So for regional transboundary for Southeast Asia, as the interest on this meeting, a lot of training has been done in terms of MSP, as well as advanced training by the French embassy together with the ASEAN. I remember I went to that in Sherman for the advanced MSP training. And MIMA also has done training for Malaysian Technological Cooperation Program under Cheryl, for the Indian South-South cooperation. So we have extended the MSP technical assistance for sharing, and they, from people from Mauritius and India, Bangladesh, also share their thoughts on this matter. So as for Asia-Pacific, in saving our ocean, we have 11 challenges. And I believe through the studies that has been done and cooperation with IOC, UNESCO of Westpac, PMC, WWF, ASEAN, and also other APEC and other regional bodies, we will address the transdisciplinary issues, geopolitical issues, cross-cutting issues, mainly in terms of to prevent and manage and develop planning for the marine spatial planning. We believe that the marine protected networks, the green port solution, MSP and blue economy for offshore energy, as well as RUU offshore aquaculture project, we need continuously dialogue, together we in the forum like this, especially to those countries, least developing countries as small island nations. So with this in conclusion, as an UN Decade Advisory Board member, I believe that IMO also together with this is all about legal frameworks as well as international law should take place. So we have that yesterday, Malaysia, in line with the effort to improve our digital bandwidth, we have launched MIASAT, and I believe that model Eurostar E3000 was launched yesterday, and we should leverage the previous initiative of MSP projects by EU, France. We have this Malaysia. Initially, we have this French embassy as well with CLS and Inframed. And we also benchmark with what has been done in Indonesia. We call it Indeso. So SDG planning, we need to co-create for a sustainable, equitable future based on 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. In short, am I ending? I give a takeaway for pastels: political, economy, social, technology, environment, legal, and security is the buzzword when we talk about blue economy, as well as using MSP for the tool in order to implement this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Okay, and finally, we have one last speaker. This is Monica Llanos. Sorry, Monica, if I get your name wrong again. She's a researcher at the Spanish Institute of Oceanography, IEO in CISIC, and she's a researcher on marine spatial planning. Since 2018, she's been developing work that relates to marine spatial planning and that connects the MSP to the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Okay, Monica, your 5 minutes start now.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Good morning, good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you, all of you for inviting me for this seminar. So I would like to share my thoughts and experience and how transboundary project that we are developing are helping the implementation of MSP national processes. So as Sheila mentioned, I am Monica Campillos. I work at the Spanish Institute of Oceanography in Spain, with all MSP related issues. So the Spanish Institute of Oceanography is a national research center of the marine environment. We are part of the Ministry of Science and Innovation in Spain. And regarding MSP work that we are developing in our institution, on one hand, we are supporting the MSP competent authority, which is the Ministry of MSP, the Ministry for Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenges, that it is implemented the MSP directive in Spain. This directive is transposed to national law due to the Royal Decree, which is an extension of the Spanish law of marine environment, which is put down the principles for planning the environment through the implementation of marine strategies. But on the other hand, in addition to the work to support the MSP national process, we participate in MSP European transboundary projects. So for this purpose, countries have at their disposal a setting of existing instruments, including research projects, as co-founded by the Directorate General Maritime Affairs and Fisheries of the European Commission. So to facilitate this, specific European funds are allocated to support the development of MSP transboundary projects among neighboring countries. So these projects have two main objectives. On one hand, to provide member states with knowledge, capacity, and methodologies to apply MSP at national process. And on the other hand, to facilitate and coherence among plans of countries with same sea basin. So in case of Spain, we have developed 7 MSP transboundary projects. Currently, we have 2 ongoing, which is MSP Med and MSP Or projects, and junior projects are started by the end of this year. So in order to achieve this objective of MSP European transboundary project, several tasks were designed to develop methodologies and good practices to test specific aspects that could contribute to potential MSP processes in selected cross-border areas. These are the case studies that are involved into this pilot project. So it helps to implement the MSP base as a lesson learned at national or transboundary case study. So what it is important to highlight of these MSP pilot projects at transboundary context is that on one hand, it boosts knowledge and methodology sharings to complete an updated view of ecological states in cases studies. In addition, it highlights the important knowledge gaps to bridge or perspective or look for some solutions. It also informs on how the evaluation or MSP designation mobilize the system knowledge in order to support MSP process in Spain or in other countries. In addition, encourage transboundary cooperation, knowledge, and sharing experiences. For this, another important aspect is that these projects involve experts from different research fields, encourage scientific collaboration, supporting public policies in different level, not in political level, just more technically. So it's fostering the stakeholder engagement. As an example of this is one of the cases studies that we are developing in the context of MSP project. For a better implementation of MSP in the Mediterranean Sea. We are having an area in the Gulf of Lion between Spain and France, and doing this case study will have involved more than 50 experts, scientists, competent authorities for different countries between France and Spain. So it's quite important, this stakeholder engagement with these cases studies. Well, another benefit of this cross-border project is the implementation of first stage of methodology and analyzing impact cumulative effect at sea, also identifying and characterizing existing interactions between activities, pressure, ecological receptors, in addition looking for data gaps identification. And finalize, these projects also allow the establishment knowledge synthesis and design different scenarios to test interaction between activities and ecosystem, especially in these pilot cases areas. So to end with, I would like to emphasize the importance to carry out these MSP transboundary projects, which are very useful tool to that facilitates the support in the implementation of MSPs in its country, and also in the development of marine spatial plans in its country. So in addition, it established collaboration through the publishing of pilot projects in transboundary context among countries, and including the development of pilot case studies in different areas. So it is important to highlight that these projects are the best opportunity to create the first link between countries at technical level, which is in long term may lead to real cooperation in joint decision levels and integrate results coming from those cases studies, especially, and it could obtain recommendation into MSP national processes to be used for the MSP national plans. So that's all that I want to share with you. Thank you.
Hold on. Thank you. Thank you very much, Monica. So if I can ask the rest of the speakers to put their video back on again, then we'll have a quick question and answer session. We have 2 questions for Ola in the question and answer group session. Ola, you might want to have a look at those and see if you can answer them. But in the meantime, because it was very directed at you, those 2 questions, I might ask a general question, and it is about the spatial scale of MSP. We're talking here about specifically regional scale. So Monica, you mentioned the fact that you have stakeholder interactions between France and Spain in the Mediterranean. And I guess, and this relates a little bit also to my question about blue economy. So how do you deal with the spatial scale of trying to do marine spatial planning at a regional scale, because the ecosystems don't end at the boundary of the countries? So how do you deal with the spatial scale of interactions in the ecosystem, and also the sort of safety issues that Marianne pointed out? How do we bring all of that together at a regional scale? I don't know if anybody, if you want to put your hand up and to answer that, that'd be great. Or just speak. Yeah, Professor Mopata?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very interesting. I just like to recall what happened for the Coral Triangle Initiative. We have the involvement of 6 countries: Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. So it is a region of the highest biodiversity of the world. And we have development partners, be it from Australia, from US, and other European countries. So I believe, as mentioned just now, at the operational level, in order for us to share best practices, we can share what happens at the local level, which means that engagement, buying in, ownership at the local level is paramount. But at the end of the day, we must have the policy driver from the national, federal, be it at the state as well as the local level. So by engaging countries, because the idea for the Coral Triangle Initiative started with Indonesia. I believe what happens for Malaysia initially was through the state of Sabah. Through the state of Sabah, as we are aware and has been mentioned earlier by the speakers yesterday, that WWF was instrumental, as well as the state approval, state mandate. They want to do it. They have the vision to actually protect the resources that they have, and they want to capitalize for the economic benefit of the people and the future generation. So by wanting to have that at the local level, at the state level, whilst at the federal level of Malaysia, the empowerment from the ministries, not only one ministry, because we have this governance arrangement with many ministries and agencies involved, with the empowerment to the state, Sabah state, be it the fisheries or Ministry of Fisheries and Ministry of Environment, they have their own level of mandate at the state government levels, and they work with the local government as well as the district levels. So we have, when it's on a smaller scale, Sabah has shown to be able to move forward, as well as the same cases like in Indonesia. We cannot do everything at once. So we have this process of having public from bottom up, but of course, the mandate coming top down to the government agencies and the missionaries. So I believe it has to have this process both ways, and as well as participation from development partners. In order to have this ambitious plan, we need to have the support of technical capability as well as the funding. So I believe that we got also from the partners in terms of training, particularly when we talk about MSP, and we also have the training for the trainers. We create focus group discussions, the technical working group. So with different sectors, as you've seen what Pauline has shown just now in Sempurna, the engagement, why they're having fun for doing that, but they take ownership by doing themselves to protect the corals, learning to learn, and leadership at the local level is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to address the regional question? I don't know. Monica?
Yeah, talking about regional level, what I exposed is in my presentation was regarding more European level, because we were talking that these projects are funded by the European Commission. But one big support that member states are done at regional level is taking part in another initiative. For example, MSP Global, coming from the IOC UNESCO, or we are part also of the WestMed initiative, BlueMed initiative. So it's at the end, we are all connected and linked for trying to gain the same objectives of MSP. So we are talking that we were working in national processes and addition in European projects, but at the end, we are involved in regional initiatives. So we are all connected and trying to be in the same roadmap.
Yeah. Ole, specifically for you, I think my question came from you made the comment that blue economy means different things in different countries. And I wonder if that, how do you bring that together if a country has considered something a blue economy and the country next door does not? How do you deal with those dichotomies in what is defined as a blue economy in countries that are operating in the same marine spatial marine spatial ecosystem? And how do you deal with that under MSP?
Thanks for that, and thanks for those questions I see in the chat. I think that is the main challenge in all countries, who drives within a country who drive that conversation. And what is blue economy? And also, in a way, indirectly now also responding to some of those questions is a little bit the same. I think we all need to consider what is the core elements of a blue economy, and if it's primarily a suite or sort of handful of sectors that all rely on oceans and they work in isolation, then of course it can be very confusing, and it's hard to actually align and find the synergies and efficiencies in coordination across the economy. The key challenge is that often some of those ocean sectors rely on some of the same resources, and this is not a good understanding where the benefits are deriving or where are the potential impact from one or the other. If that is not captured, then it becomes challenging. And I think the current trajectory is that in many countries, the ocean health and the ocean natural resources are declining. So there is some urgency from across sectors to recognize that there must be some coordination, and finding the right balance can be support sustainable ecotourism vis-a-vis local scale fisheries, vis-a-vis building nature-based solutions for carbon sequestration, for instance, in a concerted way. It's probably not a sector-by-sector approach. There will still be a lot of sector implementation. There will still be sector ministries, but there must be, or we are arguing or proposing that there must be a cross-sector coordination. And exactly. And so again, I see the question in the chat. We have been working on blue economy for some time, alongside some of our good colleagues in FAO, in World Bank, IFC indeed. And we can also see there is a bit of evolution in the blue economy approach and the thinking around it. I think 5-8 years ago, the whole narrative was crafted around blue growth. A quick sector development within any specific sector, and somehow gain quickly, tap into new ocean resources when most of the terrestrial resource has been driven down. I think we can see now quite that this thinking is maturing, and we're moving from what we call potentially a blue growth to a sustainable blue economy agenda. I think we see that in the EU, moved from a blue economy, or sorry, a blue growth agenda to a sustainable economy agenda as captured in the European Green Deal. And that is coming out more and more. I don't think there's an easy answer. I think all countries and sectors are struggling with how do we marry the economic ambition, the environmental conditions, and the social well-being at societal scale. And to get to that scale question, I think it is at the local scale, it is working at the national scale, and it is at the regional scale. They all have that challenge. Sharing transboundary resources, mitigating impact from upstream to downstream, and so forth. So we are proposing that our framework to be a way to map that out and build a strong policy coherence component before you jump into the MSP process, or as part of jumping into the MSP.
Yeah. So then finally, I think we've only got about 2 minutes left before we have to finish here. But I want to come back to Marianne and ask you how do you see the because the work that you're looking at is really about safety and security more than blue economy, for instance. How do you see that linking in with marine spatial planning, and how I could imagine that safety and security will become much more important as the blue economy becomes stronger and as the environment becomes more degraded. That might not happen, but it could very well happen. So how do you see that working together with managing the marines, what's happening in the marine space?
Well, Sheila, yes, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't very clear in my presentation when trying to establish this link and insisting on the need of, security for all stakeholders acting at sea, and notably stakeholder in relation with the blue economy and access to the resources of the sea. So in fact, there is, I think, a need to have, a maritime environment which is stable and secure and protected by or protected from many criminal activities. And this is why I think that there is a link between the safety and the security aspect with the blue economy. Because it seems to me that if you can protect the access, your own access to your own resources, there is absolutely a problem. You can't really exploit them, and maybe you can let other criminal group or actors to take a better profit than you from your own resources. And I think that the local community are very concerned by illegal fishing and how to better protect their access, not only for food security, but for global resource, because of course we all know that fishery industry came for a great part in the income of many states in the Indo-Pacific, in the South China Sea. So this is why I see the link, the implication, and the need for government authorities to think about protection of their maritime domain. And this is not to think about out security or fighting fleet. I think that marine policing and depending of, you see, the organization of a state, you can have some specific entity, Coast Guard, dedicated to the protection of your maritime domain.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I think we're out of time, if I'm not mistaken, Valerie. I think that's it. We're there. So I will just thank again our speakers, and I think I'll end with I totally agree with Professor MacArthur that really what we need is a bottom-up approach to marine spatial planning, which is often very local. But if we don't do it at a regional scale, which is usually the scale that the ecosystem is at, we won't succeed very well. And I think I will leave it at that and hand it back to you, Valerie. I think that's it. So thank you very much for all the speakers. It was a great session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheila. Thank you very much to all the speakers. I feel terribly bad to interrupt you because it was super interesting, and I know there were a few questions left, but I'm hoping we will have other opportunities to be sharing on these very interesting topics. So I know here in Malaysia, it's Friday afternoon. We have been losing some audience, and but we're very happy to have all the people who are still with us. And we would like to conclude because we had some of the speakers mentioning that we need resources, right? There were some questions about that. How do we work on all these subjects? So actually, on this occasion, the EU delegation and the French embassy wanted to share some information on the leverages and funding mechanisms that exist and that may help address all these environmental crucial issues. So we're going to start with a short presentation. I'm not rushing you at all. I'm just saying it's not very long, by Ms. Francesca Gilli. So she is the team leader of the cooperation section at the EU delegation in Thailand. Francesca has worked in Brussels from 2013 to 2017 as the geo coordinator for Tunisia at the European Commission, and she has also experience working for international NGOs in the Middle East and North Africa. So the floor is yours, Francesca. We're listening.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me properly?
Loud and clear. That's good.
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah, I'm connected to the seminar from Italy, and yeah, and the connection is not as good as when I'm in the office, but good that that you can hear me well. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me today. And indeed, I'm based in Bangkok usually, and from Bangkok we cover cooperation with Thailand and Malaysia, and we also cover some regional projects. And indeed, regional approaches, regional development is one of the keywords that I would like to highlight today. Another keyword is multilateralism. We've had speakers from international organizations, and I think, yeah, both France and the EU are active supporters of the multilateral approach. Of course, as mentioned, we should not forget the bilateral relations, but when we talk about the oceans, we need to take the bigger ecosystem in view. Other keywords are sustainability, prosperity, connectivity, governance. We need to work with a multi-stakeholder approach. So as today we have international organizations, we have national authorities, we have civil society representatives, professors from academia, representatives of private sector. So we need to work with all the stakeholders. Some were asking, how do you define policies? So at the European Union, we've recently launched a few policies and a few strategies that are relevant, and we hope we'll be able to work with our partners through these strategies, and we're actually doing that. I'm sure this was repeated many times already, and sorry, but I know the EU ambassador to Malaysia mentioned it. So the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, so the Indo-Pacific strategy of the EU was mentioned. It's extremely relevant for this seminar. It's actually the seminar is linked to this strategy, and there are 7 topics which are relevant. So the previous speakers mentioned sustainable and inclusive prosperity, green transition, governance, digital governance and partnership, connectivity, security and human security. Some of the speakers have also mentioned the Green Deal. Maybe the European consensus on development was not yet mentioned, but it's basically the EU response to the 2030 agenda and how the EU is integrating the sustainable development goals in its own work in the EU, but also in the external action when working with partners. We mentioned the regional approach, so and talking about sustainable development, I just wanted to flag that we hold a sustainable development dialogue between the EU and ASEAN. So this is really important, and of course, ocean governance, ocean management fits under this important dialogue. You've heard about blue economy, you've heard about prosperity. How do we get there? Is there a financing gap? Is there a financing need? So there's several successful initiatives of the EU. Some were presented by colleagues before. Some are linked to higher education and research, in particular Erasmus+, which offers a range of opportunity for higher and adult education. And another program is Horizon Europe, which is the framework program for research. So through these 2 big initiatives, these flagship initiatives of the European Union, there are opportunities for researchers. There are opportunities for civil society to work with the academia, for the private sector to work with academia. There were several projects mentioned, so some are funded already through these 2 initiatives, some are funded by other instruments of the European Union. In particular for researchers, I would like to mention the need to be aware of EU access. EU access is, let's say, the initiative of the EU that promotes EU funding opportunities in research. It supports researchers, for example, to apply to a Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action. So it's basically an important fellowship for researchers, and it fosters cooperation between Europe and between Southeast Asia. So the topics can be wide-ranging, but of course, ocean governance is one of the global challenges, and ocean sustainability and ocean management. So I would like to really encourage the Malaysian participants here to make sure that Malaysian universities are aware of all the research funding opportunities that the EU is providing. And your access colleagues are available to meet with research institutes, with think tanks, with the universities in Malaysia. So don't hesitate to be in touch with them. We can provide their contacts, of course. I work for the cooperation section, so and I see that Valerie is the research attaché. So these topics, they need to be integrated, they need to communicate. So we need to have policy, evidence provided by research, and we need to have projects and funding opportunities. So we need to work together among the different sectors of our institutions, of our public administration. If I can provide some information besides the research funding opportunities, we have the so-called EU DEAR program. So it's development, education, and awareness raising. This is open to mainly civil society organizations, but they can also have alliances with private sector or with institutions. So really to raise awareness in general on sustainable development. But we have some projects focusing on maritime resources, on blue economy, and how to promote to the European consumers and to our partner countries, for example, sustainable fishing or topics like this. In addition, in ASEAN, we have the EU Share project. It's also to promote and foster mobility of researchers in ASEAN, and this can also contribute to the topic of ocean governance, management, and sustainability. So we have, I would say, some cross-cutting initiatives and opportunities that, of course, can be used on maritime affairs. Another important project is the Switch Asia project. I hope you've heard about it. And the Switch Asia project is more on sustainable consumption and production. But of course, there's we welcome work on sustainable fishing and fisheries, and there are I would say there's a policy facility working on exactly how to set standards, how to make sure that policies are well integrated and well shared among the different countries in the region. But through Switch Asia, we also have calls for proposals on the green transition, on sustainable consumption and production. So I really invite those who can apply to apply. In addition, we just recently launched, I don't know if you were aware, a call for proposal for Malaysian civil society organizations. And there was one component on green transition, climate change. So this would really fit this topic. Maritime affairs, marine governance would really fit under this. In addition to more conventional projects for cooperation, we have the so-called financial instruments. Some of you might know that together with the Asian Development Bank, the European Union is supporting the ASEAN Catalytic Green Fund. Actually, the French Development Agency is quite involved also in this ASEAN Catalytic Green Fund. I don't know if Valerie, you're going to mention this. But through the ASEAN Catalytic Green Fund, a blue economy hub is being developed with the support of the AFD, the French Development Agency. And we really look forward to see a pipeline of blue projects for the ASEAN Catalytic Green Fund. So we encourage all Malaysian stakeholders to come up with ideas and to promote them through the ASEAN Catalytic Green Funds. Through our financial instrument facility, so the Asia-Pacific Investment Facility, there will be a project, again supported by the AFD, the French Development Agency, entitled For an Evidence-Based Sustainable Blue Economy in Indonesia. So we are at the very beginning of the process, but just like this kind of project, we could have projects also in Malaysia or covering different ASEAN countries. Through the European Fund for Sustainable Development that supports investment and financial instrument, we can cover projects in relation to the ocean. There's currently a call for expression of interest, so we look forward to receiving proposals from the European financial institutions, including the French Development Agency, to promote projects linked to ocean governance, ocean sustainability. So in a nutshell, these are the opportunities. So there's some opportunities for research and higher education to collect evidence, to improve the policies that then the European Union releases and publishes and uses as framework for its relations with partner countries, including Malaysia. And then we have the cooperation and international partnership funding opportunities. So we have different calls for proposals. We have the investment facilities. So we really look forward to having good ideas and good initiatives that we can then support through our existing initiatives. I hope this is quite comprehensive. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. I don't know if we have time. If you would like to have more details, please don't hesitate to send an email, and I'm happy to answer together with my colleagues in Brussels. Thanks Valerie, and thanks everyone and thanks to all the organizers today.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for all this information. I think you were very, very thorough. And I'm sure that, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time for QA session, but anyone who has any questions on these matters, please feel free to contact Francesca, to contact also the French Embassy to Malaysia, and we'll be very happy to either answer or address your questions to the relevant persons. So next, it's kind of awkward because I'm going to present myself. Right, I'm just gonna do a quick presentation on some funding tools that we have available at the French Embassy to Malaysia. And just as a very quick introduction, so I'm a marine scientist myself, and I'm the scientific attaché for science and higher education at the French Embassy to Malaysia. So this is gonna be a bit different. So I think Francesca explained very well all the strategic aspects on the Indo-Pacific strategy and the relevant themes for cooperation, including ocean governance. So I'm going to be more technical here because I think it would be useful for all of the Malaysian colleagues that are with us today. So if we could go to next slide. So this year we have launched a few mobility programs that are funded by the embassy. And when I mean by the embassy, it means by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, the MEAE. So the target, as mentioned, is the areas that are strategic for bilateral and regional cooperation. And we launched 3 calls in 2022. They are closed now, but we will probably open some at the second half of this year. So we have pre-doctoral mobility, which is aimed at students in M2 that want to pursue with a PhD in France. We also fund research stays for PhD students, especially if they are in co-tutor or co-direction. And finally, we are funding academic staff mobility periods in France, especially when they combine their research interests with the idea of developing joint research or training programs. So these calls were open earlier this year. They are closed. They were very successful. So we are trying to see how to expand them and maybe open second call at the second half of the year. So next slide. We also support collaboration on environmental issues through other mechanisms. So we use the Solidarity Fund for Innovative Projects, which is again from the French government, from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this fund allows us to fund bilateral and regional initiatives on different topics. For example, One Health, there is currently a regional project on this One Health issues. Trails project, which is innovative planting design for wildlife, climate, and livelihoods, which is multi-sector project involving CIRAD, which is a French research center, Hutan, which is an NGO based in Malaysia, UPM, and MUPP, which all of my Malaysian fellows colleagues would know. So this project is on agroforestry, but it's to say that it could cover other environmental issues, including search for marine and coastal areas. So unfortunately, currently, Malaysia is no longer available for this fund, but we are working really hard to get it back into the list of eligible countries, because this is a very valuable tool, and these projects have been very productive and successful. And finally, we also have an envelope every year for supporting projects that are led by or that involve NGOs. So we are supporting projects with conflict use between wildlife and people, for example, with Seratu Atai, but also like projects dedicated to the marine environment with Blue Hope, which is like plastic Sabah neutral. So it's an environmental organization based in Sabah, and it's against plastic pollution, basically, and raising awareness and finding solutions for recycling and reusing. So these are some of the tools that could also be used for projects, especially multi-sectorial projects. So next slide. Finally, one of our leading programs is the French-Malaysian Cooperation in Research, so PHC Hibiscus, and the MATCH program. So these two programs are co-funded and co-managed by the French and the Malaysian governments. On the French side, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, and by the MOHI on the Malaysian side. These programs have been exceedingly successful. We have over 70 applications in every call. All of these applications are high quality, and they really reflect the density of the cooperation, scientific cooperation between France and Malaysia. This year, we're gonna switch a little bit to a new formula. And so this program will probably be launched within the next couple of months. So just stay tuned, and we will be sharing information. And so my last slide, if I'm not mistaken, is precisely on the contact information. So you, of course, can feel free to write to me if you have any questions on these tools or other elements for the bilateral cooperation in research and higher education. But you can also follow us through the webmail, the web page, and the social media of the French University of Malaysia and of the Malaysia-France University Center. So we are very active on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, and we usually post a lot of notices on the funding opportunities there. So I really encourage you to just go straight away, like all of the pages, and then follow us. So I think that was the end of my publicity. Merci, terima kasih. And voila, we can move on to the end of the program. Okay, so once again, I think I would really like to thank all of you, the audience, and all of the participants, the speakers, moderators, panelists, all of my fellow colleagues who organized this event. But we're not gonna go just right now. We have one last step. So we are going to be very lucky to have concluding remarks, which are gonna be delivered by Norazlinda Mott-Sibi, who is the Director of Administration and Finance at MIMA, the Maritime Institute of Malaysia. And these concluding remarks will be delivered on behalf of the Director General of MIMA, Datuk Dr. Sabirin Jafar. So Norazlinda Mott-Sibi, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, esteemed moderators, speakers, and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to deliver the concluding remarks by the Director General of MIMA. Honorable participants, we have come to the end of this two-day interactive dialogue and seminar on enhancing the area of ocean governance of the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. I would like to thank all the participants today, Your Excellencies and your officers, for your support to this conference. It has been an honor to work with the Embassy of France and the EU delegation. Such a lively and stimulating discussion at this gathering, full of eminent people representing the government, academia, and industry players, have provided us with the much needed perspectives, interpretations, and knowledge on the subject. Ladies and gentlemen, the significant economic contribution of the oceans has to be valued. With population growth and changes in associated assumption patterns, demand is being placed increasingly on new sources of resources, leading to the creation of large-scale developments in ocean spaces. In many instances, the prevalent decline in ocean health due to human activities is a growing cause of concern. A sustainable and strategic approach on the development of ocean resources and environmental sustainability will be important drivers and enablers to blue economy, whilst fueling national policies and strategic changes to accommodate the growing ocean sectors. The need for balanced approach to the governance of ocean spaces through a well-developed framework, as well as institutional support and capacity to fuel sustainable growth, is ever more impressive now than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of MIMA and the organizers, I take this opportunity to thank all the moderators, speakers, and participants for your thoughts, ideas, and recommendations. We hope that the time spent during the course of this seminar will be beneficial to your duties and in addressing the challenges that lie ahead. Last but not least, thank you for the support and cooperation, especially from the French Embassy in Malaysia and the EU delegation for making this possible. Thank you, and see you again at our future engagements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Norazlinda Matsibi, for these concluding remarks. And Cheryl, I think that with this, we're going to be able to officially conclude this seminar, Saving Our Oceans, the case for MSP. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you very much to all our colleagues from MIMA, the EU delegation, and the French Embassy who made this possible. And we hope to see you very soon again with some other events to help the preservation and conservation of our oceans. So thank you very much, and terima kasih.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.